Then the Lord said, "You're being selfish with my money. It's all his. And the more he can trust you with it, the more he's going to grant you. How faithful you are in the little, he will add on more and expand your plate. Because at the end of the day, what really matters isn't how many zeros are in your bank account, but it's how we're advancing the kingdom. How we're seeing souls saved, disciples made. It's not about your jet skis and your boats and your private planes. It's just, that doesn't last.
100%.
Somebody's soul lasts forever.
Welcome back to the Center Podcast. In this episode, Avery and I sit down and we talk about strengths that God has given us, stressing about the future, and just navigating a lot of those stressors in our life. And I'm so excited for you to sit down with us. It is a super chill conversation, just two guys sitting on a couch hanging out, and I can't wait for you to be a part of it. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the episode. To kick this episode off, Avery, we're talking about kingdom work, God-given strengths, and long-term jobs and the stress of those. And man, when it comes to kingdom work, do you think that you have to work in ministry to do kingdom work?
I think kingdom work is anything that the Lord is calling you to do for the specific season you're in. So whether that's in ministry where, either you work for a church, you work for a Christian nonprofit, or just, when you think of the term ministry, you have those jobs that it's like, okay, that's in ministry.
Yeah.
And then you have, just regular jobs that are in the workplace. Those can still be, you can still reach people, and those still have purpose in, furthering, the Lord's family and his kingdom. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I obviously work at Caleb, and it's the first nonprofit that I've worked in, which is crazy to say because Caleb's huge.
Yeah.
But it is an atmosphere of, oh wow, there's a lot of people here who love Jesus. And while yes, we do kingdom work, I remember my first week at Highbrow, which was, dude, next week's episode is going to be at Highbrow. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I remember my first week at Highbrow was a lady came up and she was like, hey, I don't know. She's like, I don't know you and I don't know how you're going to take this, but I'm just going to tell you anyway. She was like, but I see the Holy Spirit inside of you. As I was my first day at Highbrow, taking orders. And I remember just being like, wow, this is exactly where God has me. You know what I mean? And so I agree completely. I think that wherever you're at, you can do ministry. And I don't think that ministry necessarily is going to do work, but it's bringing, sometimes ministry looks like bringing something to your workplace and just stewarding well with what you have and what you've been given. And I saw that at Highbrow, and now I'm actually at a nonprofit, and you're working with your brother, you're working in his own business. And so I think that, yeah, it's just an encouragement to everyone that's listening and watching that wherever you are ministering and that you can bring God into whatever job you're doing. You don't have to leave your job to go do ministry unless God's obviously calling you to do that. I mean, I have a friend who's over in third world countries preaching the gospel and building towns, and that's awesome. That's a way of ministry. That's a way of furthering the gospel. But then I know people who are in the workplace, who are in the workforce, who are, they're building up businesses, they're selling houses, they're remodeling places for the glory of God and to help other people. And so I definitely think that's a limiting mindset that we have as Christians is, hey, you have to be in a church or working as a nonprofit to be in ministry. Yeah. But that's not always the case.
I mean, the amount of opportunities, when you're in the marketplace of people who don't know the Lord and people who need to, hear about Jesus, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think something that the Lord had to help me with was, being in jobs that aren't faith-based, still calling me, like, just because it's not a faith-based job, I'm still calling you to share the faith, and it's, especially with the job I have now, we do biblically based health and PE curriculum that we sell to mostly private Christian schools and some public, and that's faith-based. But one of our what's it called? It's like assistants, I guess, who they work overseas
Mm-hmm.
in Iraq. So I talk with him every day. His name's Ali, and he's Muslim. So that's also a great opportunity. Like, hey, this is faith based, but I get to, share Jesus with a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
So just finding those opportunities, always being open, and I think that's just really encouraging to think of it that way too.
That's cool. That's cool. What would your advice be to someone who is working a job that they're not necessarily wanting to be in, and they don't see a future there, but they also don't see a way out?
Mm-hmm.
What would be some advice you'd give to someone that would be in that position?
I think just first submitting it to the Lord,
Hmm.
and seeing that, I have a purpose here. Because I think you can get into that rut of, when you really look kind of selfishly and, think, oh, I don't really see a future in this. I don't like this, especially the I don't like this. I can't do this for the rest of my life. Or we kind of bring that out of proportion. Like for me, when I worked at Starbucks, I thought a lot like, oh, I can't do this for the rest of my life.
Right.
But it's like, why am I even thinking about that in the first place? I'm not going to work at Starbucks for 60 years, unless the Lord called me to that. But, obviously he didn't. So just submitting it to the Lord and allowing every, day to be a new calling to give it all to the glory of God.
Right, absolutely. I think in those times of complaining, I've done it too. Oh
Mm-hmm.
man, I've done it so much. In those jobs where I'm like, I don't want to be here. I have a passion doing this. Why do I have to be here? That was me at Highbrow. To be completely honest with you, after 2 years, I was like, all right, God, I'm done.
Yep.
Bring
Yep.
me to something else. I don't want to be in coffee for this long. And if you know me, my personal testimony is when I actually went to K-Love, they found me. And when I went in for my interview, they looked at me and they said, all right, I want you to, like, we sat down, we talked, we caught up, and then they said, all right, I want you to go make a latte.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't have the training that I had at Highbrow, I wouldn't have been able to make a latte, make a cortado,
Yep.
make a traditional macchiato, and just do those things. I wouldn't have gotten the job because they literally told me after the interview, they said, if you didn't have the experience that you have, we wouldn't have hired you.
Yep.
And that was a super humbling thing for me because then I looked at God and I was like, oh, that's why you had me at Highbrow for so long. And in the midst of me complaining and grudging and being like, God, I don't want to be here, he was like, Garth, I'm working something out. Can you be patient? Can you stop complaining? Like, can you work faithfully at what I've given you and then just be patient for my timing?
Yeah.
And that was kind of like a punch to the throat.
Yeah. And he always opens up a door when the season you're in is closing.
Hmm.
So he prepares a way and it's in his perfect timing. And, I've had times in my life when I haven't, I did it in my timing and I was like, well, I regretted that. I wish so you have those things and then you can just trust in the Lord.
Hmm.
He has your best interest at heart. And, so I think that's always a thing to remember.
It's good.
So
We hear about God's timing all the time.
mm-hmm.
And I ask this because I would like to know this for myself. But someone who's longing to be in a relationship that's centered around Christ one day, a lot of my audience knows that I am single and that I've shared my experience with my past relationships and what I've learned. And I would like to hear from you as a married man, just some encouragement for people like me who might be in a position that's, hey, I haven't found that person yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I spend my time preparing myself? Because I think there's a level of, sometimes we think that God will give us a wife or a husband when we're ready for it. But sometimes I know plenty of people who have gotten married and they still have a porn problem, or they still have a addiction or a gambling problem. Like they're not 100% ready for it, yet God still brings a wife or a husband to help fix that situation. So it's different for a lot of people, and God does a lot of different things. But I think a lot of times in my mind and in my head, I'm like, I need to have it all together before God gives me it, and I need to earn it so God gives me a wife. But I know that's not how God works. It
Mhm.
could be that could be my situation, but maybe it's not. So, what would be your advice for someone like me, for other people out there who are also waiting for that?
Yeah. I think even just a quick thought that helped me, especially when I was in that season and then going through premarital after I proposed,
Hmm.
was realizing, and it's not just for marriage, it's also for just a lot of things in life. You can't 100% be ready for anything. You can be as ready as you can be and allow the Lord to help you, prepare you as much as he can, but there's going to be things that just come up that, are like, oh, I didn't realize that. Oh, I didn't expect that. But that's, a part of how, allowing the Lord to lead you in that. Um, and just the encouragement of just, being as ready as you can be.
Hmm.
If there's those things in your life, like you were talking about, gambling, pornography, or just those certain, things, you should deal with them. Because you don't want to bring that baggage into your marriage. And that was a big thing during premarital. Like, what's the baggage you have? And then how can we deal with that so both of you don't bring in the baggage to this marriage? Because, as you become one in marriage, you don't want to have all that extra stuff you're bringing in from, um, your single seasons. Um, and yeah, and not rushing the Lord. Um, you know, because when I wasn't married, I really wanted to be married. Um, I don't think I really rushed, but I wasn't, excited to be in the waiting. So I think enjoying the waiting season more. And because it is a blessing, being single and being in that season, because the Lord's doing stuff in your own life, in your own heart, that just needs to be done before you get married.
Hmm.
And being married, you have a lot of responsibility, but it's so worth it.
Hmm.
And and when you wait and the Lord brings that person that he's calling you to, and one of the most comforting facts of being married, or just feelings of being married, is I know 150,000% that Rachel, my wife, is who the Lord had for me.
Hmm.
And it's just, so when we go through some hard times or some difficult times or some not so fun times, I've only been married almost 2 years now, but when those times come, the Lord's in the center of our relationship and we can get through those times.
Hmm.
It's not like, oh no, this thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's so, having the Lord as your rock and having him lead you just carefully through those relationships.
That's really good. Thanks for
So
sharing.
yeah.
Yeah, contentment.
Yeah.
That's what I
Being okay
that's what I
with where
hear.
you're at. And
Mm.
that's the same thing with being in a job you don't like. It's just a lot of things.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Wow. Learning how to be content. That's one thing that, man, I don't think contentment is something that is popular
Mhm.
with just the world in general. And I think that there's even some things in Christianity that I think in the church that there's a pressure of, hey, if you're not married, then you're not as mature
Mhm.
as a married couple in the church is. And that's something that I haven't seen a ton in the church, but I've read about and I've heard about that a lot of other people struggle with, is that, man, people look down on me because I'm not married.
Mhm.
And that's not how people should be treated. It might be an unfortunate reality, but I know that that marriage doesn't define your worth. And like you said, singleness and marriage, it's both a blessing, both comes with its own struggles, and just learning how to be content in
Yeah.
the situation. Didn't expect to be talking about relationships, but here we are.
Love it.
Dude, just off the rip.
Yeah.
Sometimes that
Yeah.
happens. Um, so one other thing that I wanted to talk about was kind of like God-given strengths. I know that microphone is
Sounds so good. Just want to make sure.
giving you some props. I appreciate
It's fine.
that. Thank you.
I try.
You're the man, dude. You're the man.
I'm like, come fix it.
I was thinking about it. I was like,
You're like,
I can just
oh
lean over and
gosh.
just help you
Yeah.
out with that microphone.
Yeah.
Um, man, God-given strengths. How do you find them, and how do you acknowledge them? Because I think that that's something that I even wrestle with sometimes.
Mhm.
Is what am I good at?
That's a good question. I think, in prayer And especially just finding different things like that you're able to serve in. That'll bring out your strengths too.
Mm.
And just being honest with yourself, especially about, your weaknesses, what the Lord's helping you with. But there are those like natural strengths that, everyone has that differs. Or if it's not really a strength, but the Lord's calling you to step up in that area, just, uh, allowing the Lord to help you with that. I'm trying to think of, I'm trying to step up in a way of just memorizing scripture.
Mm.
I'm terrible at memorizing words.
Same.
When it comes to music, I don't know if because I've done it for years. It's just easy to me. It comes easy to me, or melodies. But when it comes to words of songs, I have no idea.
Yeah.
There's worship songs that I've played 10,000 times. I could sing you the melody,
But
sing
you can't
sing
read
you
back
the
the
guitar
lyrics.
parts, and I'm like, I have no idea what the lyrics are. I know the premise of the song and kind of what it's saying, but
Right.
like specific verses, I'm like, couldn't tell you.
At a loss.
So stepping up
that.
in that way, memorizing scripture, because that'll just also help more with hiding it in your heart too, and just, so, but as I do that more, and as the Lord helps me with that, then that will be my strength.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because He's my strength, like even if you're lacking in some area, He's not. So
that's good.
it's
one thing
yeah.
I thought of when you were talking was the putting yourself out there. I think that a lot of people are afraid to try new things, and that is the only way that we can learn about what we might be good at.
Yep.
When I started this podcast, I only knew that I loved talking about Jesus and faith-based content, or faith-based topics, I should say. And I also knew that I was fascinated with content creation in general. And I didn't want to do other sort of content like vlogs or pranks or anything like that. I wanted to stick to kind of my own creative style, and video podcasts were kind of blowing up. So I was like, why don't I try this? I tried it and I love it. I love doing this. I don't always have time for it, which is unfortunate, but I want to make more time for it. And I really enjoy this. But I wouldn't have known that unless I really was like, hey, Lord, like you said, also praying about it.
Yep.
Asking the Lord, hey, is this something that I should do? Can you open this door for me? And He totally did.
Yeah.
And how did you know that you wanted to do music?
Well, I just, growing up in the church and then, seeing worship, I just loved worship team. And then I started off just learning drums, and then I got a month into that and I was like, okay, I do not like this actually. And I just wasn't really good at it. I wasn't picking it up. So then I started bass, and then I liked bass a lot better, and, just, played on worship teams and stuff like that. So just, doing it more and just being like, I feel a calling to worship in this way, and I love it.
Absolutely.
And seeing the importance too of, it's just as important to be down, in the crowd of people worshiping too, like in the congregation, not from like, I'm high and mighty, I'm up on the platform playing, but it's like we're all worshiping.
It's really good. It's really good.
So
switching gears, I want to talk about stressing about the future, because I think that comes with that whole long-term goal with, am I in a job and am I in a season of life where I don't see this carrying out for the rest of my life? What advice would you give to someone who's stressing about the future?
I think just, focus on today. I forget what specific verse it is, but that verse about, tomorrow has its own worries.
Yes, I think that's in Matthew. It's good.
Just focus on today. And because I feel like and I've done this a lot, like if you look too much, which is always important to plan for the future, but when you focus on it too much, it'll rob you of what you need to do that day.
Yeah.
And you'll totally miss, what the Lord's calling you to do that day, whether that's a person to talk to, whether that's just conversation you need to have, or just something you need to do in work. If you just constantly think about, well, what am I going to do in 10 years and just really worry about it, then you're going to just miss all that stuff of, why you're there in the first place.
It's really good. Yeah. And, just for you too, I'm not looking for a perfect answer. I want the Avery Tate answer.
Yeah.
And that was an Avery Tate answer. So I appreciate it.
That's what and trusting God,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, what does that even look like? Trusting God. I think that in my head, I sometimes think that trusting God, it's like a one and done thing. I'm like, oh, I'm good and I'm set. Today I chose to trust God and I'm trusting him every day now.
Yeah.
But it's a daily thing.
Yeah.
It's a daily surrender of God, I'm scared. And like you said earlier, actually, this ties into this, being honest with yourself on saying, God, I'm scared for the future, or God, I'm scared to take this opportunity. I'm scared to do this. And just being real with him and just being honest with him. And that's the first step of moving in the right direction, is being honest with where you're at and saying, you know what, God, I'm scared of what the future holds because I don't know what it holds and I can't control it. And I've realized how much little control I have, but I'm choosing to trust that you have a good plan.
Yep.
And that you have everything prepped and that you're working.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting concept on, should we be, this is one thing I've wrestled with, and it's, what does it look like, or what's the difference? What's the balance, I should say? What's the balance between trusting God and being a good steward? Because I find myself, hey, should I be working on the podcast as hard as I can because that's what God's given me? Or on the other extreme, should I not work on it as hard as I can because by working on it as hard as I can, I'm not trusting God? Or if I'm not working as hard on the podcast, bear with me as I explain this out of thin air.
I'm the same.
I can either choose to work on it or not work on it.
Yeah.
If I choose to work on it, am I trusting God or am I not trusting God by working on it? And then if I'm choosing not to work on it, am I being a bad steward or am I trusting God by not working on it and being like, you know what, God, it's all on you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's,
I'm sorry for that terrible word.
No, I know what you're I think I know what you're saying. Like, through all of it, you're trusting God and you're stewarding that thing, whatever that is, for as long as he calls you to steward it.
Right.
And being in that place of, even if you should work on your podcast at this time or if you should do something else, asking the Lord. Because that was one thing that I used to struggle with and can, still struggle with a little bit, is just not being honest and open with God and being kind of like, oh, I don't know, I'm not gonna, whatever. But he already knows your every thought.
Right. And that's the funny thing.
And being in it. Yeah. So I think just being open, Lord, do you want me to work on this right now? Or do you want me to do something else? And he'll tell you. When you ask, when you knock, he'll answer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
One interesting thing that happened today, I went upstairs to the second floor, which is the pastoral care unit at K-Love. And I have a really great friend over there. Shout out to Landon. He was on the podcast. Go check out his episode. When I went up to him and I was like, yo, I am struggling with a lot of doubts. And I was struggling with that today. And I was like, I have been saving for this specific thing. And I've been expectant of it. I've been excited for it. It's going to improve the podcast. But now that I'm at that, now that I have what I need to actually go through with it, I'm doubting myself. I'm saying, can this podcast really make it? Can I really do this? Can this really sustain me in the long run? And I've just been having all these doubts. And I don't believe it's out of nowhere. I definitely believe it's spiritual. And so I went up to him and I was like, I need prayer. And so he prayed over me. And one interesting thing that we did together, which really shocked me, he said, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. And without even thinking about it, I want you to give me a yes or no answer. Don't even think about it. Just gut reaction. And he was like, do you need this? And I said, yes, without even thinking about it. And he was like, okay. And he asked me a follow-up question of like, do you feel peace about it? I was like, yes. And he said, okay, it doesn't seem like it's a spiritual thing. It doesn't seem like it is a not spiritual thing, but it doesn't seem like you're wrestling with it spiritually. It seems like you are justifying it with your like you're justifying not going through with it because of your fears and your doubts.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like God's telling you no and you know it's a no, but you're trying to convince yourself that it's a yes, which I've done multiple times
Yeah.
in my life. But rather it is a God is saying yes, he's giving you permission, but yet you're scared to go through with it because you're trusting the numbers in your bank account and you're trusting the numbers in your following and in your Spotify and your YouTube. You're trusting those numbers more than you're trusting God.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oof, that just, it hit me
Yeah.
right there. I was just like, wow, that is exactly what I needed to hear. And he was absolutely right. And he gave the example of the story of David where he counted his men before going into battle. And the general was like, dude, don't count your men. I'm telling you, don't do it. And David was like, I'm doing it anyway. And so he did. And God was displeased with David because David was choosing safety in his own numbers versus choosing to find safety in God.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself doing that a lot of just, what's the number in my bank account? How many followers do I have? How many views have I gotten this month? And looking at those numbers and finding my security in those numbers. Some days, some months are high, most months are low. And I'm like, man, God, how am I supposed to do this? And then today just kind of clicked for me. I was like, wow, I'm actually trusting the numbers more than I'm trusting God.
Mm-hmm.
That's convicting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even just to encourage you, even if, because when I hear the term somebody has made it, they're rich, they can buy anything they want,
Mm-hmm.
they're popular, I think of that. And maybe maybe you'll get to the point where, the podcast is huge, you're very successful, which would be great. But even if it was smaller, if it didn't ever explode, like kind of how you may be thinking, if it doesn't ever generate a massive amount of money, um, you'll still make it in a sense that you were obedient to the Lord.
Right.
So he can still call you to things, even if it's, this is going to be your only income for years, this is going to explode, or if it's a side thing that he's calling you to.
Yep.
So it's, that just encourage you in that way of, because that, was a struggle for me too. Like, oh, how am I going to make this much and stuff like that, when it's like, as long as I'm being obedient to the Lord, I've made it,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I really appreciate that encouragement.
yeah.
There's definitely a lot of pressure in our world today, especially guys our age, where we see on social media all of these online gurus and we see these online influencers who are making big amounts of money. And we're like, man, at least for me, I'm like, man, I look at that and I'm like, how can I get there? How can I make it? Like you're saying, how can I have enough money to be able to travel, do what I want to do, not have to be financially, um, like not being stressed about my finances. And I think about my friend, he said this one time, which really it's stuck with me. He said, I'm afraid to pursue something that'll make me a ton of money because I'm afraid that I'm going to start not trusting God because I'm going to start trusting my finances more.
Yeah.
And he had the wisdom to know where he was at with that. And I remember that struck me. And I was like, huh,
Mm-hmm.
where's my heart in that? Am I in a season of receiving a lot of money to where I can steward it well? Or am I in a season of relying so much on money that I'm stressing out? And God's like, dude,
Yeah.
I'm so much bigger than your bank account.
Yeah. And it's all his anyway.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't matter if you make 20,000 a year or 200 million a year. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and he, even for when I first started regularly tithing at church, at first it was like 10%.
Holy moly.
And on top of that, give to missions or whatever. It was just like, whoa, this is a lot of money. Like, I don't know if I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just realizing this is his money he's blessed me with, and he's going to open up his storehouses when he wants to.
Right.
When I'm doing the things he's calling me to. And even I remember this one time where I just audibly heard his voice. I was in service and they were asking for us to pray about if there's a certain amount you would want to give to missions. And Rachel, she typed something on her phone, like a number, and she like turned it over to me in church. You know how you do that with your
Yep.
friends or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
And I saw the number and I was like, and I was like, we'll pray about it. But like, no. I said like, we'll pray about it, but I was like, no.
Right.
And then immediately I was, was paying attention again. And then the Lord said, you're being selfish with my money. And I was like,
Oh.
so I tapped her and I said, give it. Because it's true. It's like, it's all his. And the more he can trust you with it, the more he's going to grant you. And how faithful you are in the little, he will add on more and expand your plate. Because at the end of the day, it's all, what really matters isn't how many zeros are in your bank account, but it's, how we're advancing the kingdom and how we're seeing souls saved, disciples made. It's not about, your jet skis and your boats and your private planes. It's just, that doesn't last.
100%.
Somebody's soul lasts forever. Which is, I have to like you were saying earlier, like every day trusting the Lord. And even recently I haven't done it every day, but the Lord's just been challenging me to every day when I am in my time with the Lord, just end it with just being on my knees and just being like, Lord, I submit this day to you. You are Lord over my life. I'm not in charge. I put down King Avery, and you're the Lord of my life.
Yeah.
Today. And it's doing that the past couple days. It's just been so like refreshing. Because it's not, as I'm obedient, it's not all on me. I'm trusting the Lord.
It's good.
And that's way more fulfilling than, I'm just going to go out here and grind and make money.
Yep.
So,
dude, man, these are all really good lessons that I've been learning over the last couple of years, and it sounds like you've also learned over the last couple of years. And it's encouraging to be able to sit down with other people in the faith and be like, hey, let me encourage you.
Yeah.
And let me speak life into you real fast. And to be completely honest with all of you that are listening and watching, this has definitely been more of a chill episode. I haven't really had a lot of agenda with this, and we had a couple points to talk about, and we've kind of just been free flowing the entire time. And I got my coffee that says "Why Not" on it.
I have my bear mug. Looks like a bear.
Got a candle.
Just hanging out,
dude.
Having a conversation.
Just a couple of dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But dude, I really appreciate, once again, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your life and sharing your experiences, because my prayer is that even though episodes like these where it's not scheduled out and bullet points of what should we talk about, what should we go back to, but rather, there are some episodes where it's like this, it's more free flowing. And also, for those of you listening and watching, I would love to hear from you guys on what kind of content sounds good to you. Is it content like this, or is it the episode last week with Kyle? I would love to hear from you guys on what is it that you find enjoyable from me, from this podcast, because I've said this before to all of them and to all of you, that this podcast it exists for you guys, and it exists to bring Jesus to you, to inspire and encourage you to pursue Jesus and keep him in the center of your life. And this is encouraging for me. Yeah. So I hope it's encouraging for all of you guys listening and watching.
And it's just uplifting. Where two or more are gathered,
he is
so
there.
So is the Lord. Yeah. Yeah. And even just a verse I had on my heart, me as I'm trying to memorize scripture.
Yes, sir.
And this is a basic one, or not basic in the way of, being basic, but just, Sunday school. But Jeremiah 29:11, where for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper and not harm you, plans to give you hope in the future.
Preach.
And just one quick thing that the Lord's been highlighting recently is, for I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord. So, it's not, here are my plans, Lord. I want you to bless that. And then when I need you, I'll need you. But it's, the Lord has specific plans for you, seasonal assignments. And when you align with that and you're obedient, it's just, he doesn't promise an easy life, but it's so fulfilling and so purpose-driven, and we're not just here to be here,
Right.
Yeah. But one of my favorite quotes that one of my pastors says is, and I think he got it from someone, but we're not just born into time, but for such a time as this.
That's good.
And just, we're here for this time, for a purpose, to reach specific people and spheres of influence that the Lord calls us to. So be encouraged. You're doing a great job just seeing this. These are important conversations, whether if it's chill or bullet pointed. It's always encouraging when we're talking about the Lord and how we can help each other, because that's what it's about. You're still learning, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
People who are 70 are still learning. It's just, you never stop learning, because the Lord always reveals something new about his character and where he's leading you as you trust him more. So
It's good.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, it is definitely encouraging.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting. I don't feel this pressure of needing to perform. You've created such a good environment of just chill.
Yeah,
on
it's
this
just
couch.
conversations and the leather couch,
Dude,
when
you had good conversations and a leather couch, you can't go
Keurig.
wrong. And
Yeah.
a Keurig coffee, dude,
Yeah.
you can't go wrong. I'm gonna give you some fast-paced, fun questions to answer, and
Okay.
I will answer them with you,
Okay.
so we can kind of give our own little thoughts and see what we're thinking. So these are kind of fun. Okay. Would you rather know your entire future or take it one day at a time?
Take it one day at a time.
I agree. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
If I know how I'm going to die, I'm going to be anxious every single day.
Oh, yeah, I mean that, and just like, I don't think I would appreciate the day as much if I'm like, well, I'll just end up here. What's the point of you know what I'm saying?
100%. 100%. What's your go-to worship song when you're feeling stressed?
Oh.
I'm going to pull mine up.
What's yours? I still gotta think.
You know what? Recently, it has been this song by Aaron Williams and John Reddick. It's called Abide. Hold up. Let me get to the actual page.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Such a good song,
See, I knew
bro.
the music. I just did not know that. Yeah. Okay, that's why it's hard. I think, well, I have just so many. I think one of mine, because it's also, I think, different ones for different seasons.
For sure.
But I think one right now is, I don't even know the name of the song for
That's
us.
okay.
It's terrible.
Do you know who's it by?
No, but it's like, it's the better is one day in your house, better is one day.
Oh, yeah.
That
better
one.
Is one
It's
day
old, bro.
Hey, that's a solid song,
then
though.
thousands else. Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably
okay.
that one. I love
All right,
that one.
let's go. If God sent you a text about your future, what would you want it to say?
Oh, these are hard. What the? Do you know yours?
If God were to send me a text about my future,
Okay.
Honestly, I wouldn't want anything specific. I might just want God just to be like, bro, just wait and see what I got for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, he pretty much already said that in Jeremiah 29:11, like what you mentioned, but I feel like just a personal message from Jesus of like, he's got cool things for you.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty
Yeah,
sweet.
I think something like that. Like, just the whole thought of like,
Avery, you will be a father of many.
oh gosh,
Father of 8. Whew.
I just reply, money. And then he replies, it's all mine. And I'm like, dang it, you're right. And then he
Shoot,
just goes,
fine.
I'm God.
Fine, I'll give you 15%.
50%. Yeah, probably something like that.
Coffee and prayer or worship and a walk. What's your stress reliever?
Is the weather fine? Like I don't wanna worship and walk if it's like thunderstorming.
It's a
I
good
would say
question.
first it depends on the weather because I like both, but probably worship and walk.
Okay, cool.
Or just worship. Like I'll just take a bass or guitar and just
Heck yeah.
get 3 songs in, and I'm like, I don't even remember what I was stressing about.
If you could have coffee with any biblical figure to talk about God, who would it be?
It can't be Jesus?
No.
Dang it, you
feel
can't
like
talk
that's-
about the Father himself?
Can we talk about you real
Um,
fast?
Any biblical
I feel like
character.
Jesus is kind of a given, you know?
Probably Moses,
It's good.
just because he was, yeah, I think I would relate to him kind of with the burning bush, like, oh, I can't do this. Like, he stuttered, just his speech wasn't perfect. So I just feel like, that kind of relates to me. Like, I can't do all this stuff, but it's him being led by
For sure.
the Lord. So.
For sure.
You?
Probably King David.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one.
Homeboy was wild.
Yeah.
Um,
Slinging stones.
Yeah, dude. Killing giants.
Yeah.
Whew. Crazy. What's one thing you used to stress about that now seems silly?
Probably marriage.
Yeah.
Or just my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Fair. The timing of all of that.
Fair.
Yeah. You?
I would say my future when I was at Highbrow. Just wondering what was next.
Yeah.
I'm stressing out about that a lot. Yeah. I didn't need to stress out about that. All right. Last one. If you could hear God's voice audibly for 1 minute, what's the first thing you'd ask him?
Probably just thanking him.
That's a good answer, man.
Just
my answer is not going to be that good.
Well, I think anything's good, but I don't know. I think just thanking him for his sacrifice and stepping into out of eternity and
yeah, it's good.
Taking on our sin.
It's good.
I don't know. I mean, that would take a lot longer than a minute, but
right. I mean, hey, it's God.
So you?
Probably like want to run a game of 2K. I'm kidding.
He would destroy you, bro.
He would.
He would just have a team of Steph Currys, or just him. He would just destroy. I always used to say that. I'm like, what if? And it's like, bro, I had this joke with my brothers. Like, yeah, well, God would do better. Like LeBron James, like God would just destroy LeBron James if he wanted to. And I don't know why it was so random.
Well, you and your brothers are fun guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
fun
bro,
times.
Once again, thank you for coming on the show. Like I mentioned before, I'd be surprised if people made it this far. I mean, for me, I'm like, this was more of a thing needed for me than it was, because usually I'm trying to create content that's geared towards all of you guys that are listening and watching, but this was needed for me. Just to sit
and maybe
down
people listening, that one, even if it's just one thing, one takeaway, helps a lot, even when you don't know it.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on the show once again, and everyone listening and watching, thank you for being here. Yeah. You're the man, Avery.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Garth. What do you call your audience? The Centurions or something? Thank you, Centurions. It's so stupid. All right, and we're out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a comment in the comment section letting me know what stuck out to you and what was helpful. And I'd love to just hear your thoughts, as well as if you're interested in hearing more content from the Center Podcast, go ahead and click this button over here, which is filled with different episodes that you might actually recognize some of the people there. Or if you're wanting to subscribe for future content, go ahead and click this button right here, and you'll be able to subscribe and see future content that comes on the channel. Once again, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.